Welcome back. You're still watching Closing Bell Africa. Of course, every Friday we shift our focus to the Southern African markets. And today with me, I have Jon Foster-Pedley. He's the Dean and Director at the Henley Business School of Africa. And we'll be zoning in on Mozambique. As you'll remember, back in 2010, we did see substantial offshore gas finds. Where is that particular country now? Let's speak to our guest to give us some insight on this. Jon, thanks for your time. This was the second biggest gas find since Qatar.
It's huge. I mean, I don't think people really understand quite how big it is. You've got enough gas there to fuel South African energy, for example, for 150 to 200 years on its own. So if we use that gas here and build gas-powered stations plus some other diversified, we wouldn't be having lights off, put it that way. And so Mozambique's got this windfall find, and they're taking a lot of this gas, which is natural gas, and they're compressing it into liquid natural gas. But most of that production's been sold off mainly to Japan starting in 2019. So what we have to do is work out how we can beneficiate and make use of this natural gas. For us in South Africa, we'd certainly like to get hold of it. For them in Mozambique, the question for them is, how are they going to use this money? Are they going to use it to plow back into the economy? Are they going to use it to diversify the economy and build skills? And
let's talk about some of those concerns. What would they do with this money? You speak about the potential of all of this and the trickle-down effect. Often when we see African countries with huge resources, they always say that it doesn't trickle down to grassroots level. What needs to be done?
Well, obviously governance and leadership, but it's too easy for us to point at government and leadership and say, you've got to get it right. I think the business sector has to take initiatives. I think the people within Mozambique have got to step up to wanting to get the skills. What you've got in many African countries is either money coming through commodities or oil or whatever, and then people not being educated in sophisticated business skills, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's banking or whether it's in the services industries, so that they can compete in the world. What you've seen in Dubai is oil money used to develop a very diversified economy. And you saw the same thing in Thailand, not oil money used, but you saw a less diversified economy being proactively diversified. So now they've got a resilient, interesting economy that can stand on its own in the world. And that's what we'd like to see in Africa. And we have all the intelligence and capability we want in Africa. People don't realize that. I'm very lucky. I run a business school that's internationally accredited, and we're 75% black Africans there. They are examined by the same people who examine MBAs in the UK and France and China. And the African people are doing as well, if not better, in those blind assessed exams. I don't think we realize how smart we are. We can build economies that matter, and I'd love to see that money being used to assiduously train up a generation so that Mozambique is proud and stands on its own in the world, and in a sense is one of the leaders of Africa in that respect.
Jon, you spoke about diversification and looking at Mozambique and its economic makeup. Sector-wise, agriculture is still very much a huge part of that economy. Could we get this right?
Yes, I think we could. Look, 80% of the economy in Mozambique is agriculture still, and a lot of that's very rural. We're seeing generally throughout Africa that agriculture is growing, but most of the growth comes from the urban areas, so people going into the cities, starting new businesses. We absolutely could get it right. I was in holiday in Mozambique about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and you drive up these really great roads that have been built by the Chinese, I imagine, and you're seeing oranges and coconuts and a hugely active entrepreneurial substrate. But what you're not seeing is the education, the support, the institutions, and the logistics and everything else to help people make money out of that in the countryside. So all we have to do is start developing better communications, some basic training, develop entrepreneurship, and you'll see more of that money being used by the people on the ground rather than slipping offshore, and you see that wealth staying in the country. And I think this is a model for developing most of our economies in Africa.
Talking about development, Mozambique is going through an economic transformation. It's under new leadership. The business friendliness of it when it comes to doing business there, what is it like?
Well, I just asked a very well-known and a very influential wheeler dealer, shall we say, in Mozambique, what he thought of the government. And he was singing its praises. You know, Philippe Nyusi is the new president. He was saying they're open for business, they're very South African friendly. I mean, I'm sure some people will disagree with this, but that was his point of view. And in fact, we've really got great potential to do business in Mozambique. You know, there's always two stories in Africa. There's the one story of corruption, disease, disaster, and how things are going up and down, and the other story of potential and possibility. But the thing that I think most people forget, particularly overseas, is that through all that turmoil, there's a consistent upward trend of education, of achievement, and of growth in economies. You're looking at an economy that's growing at 7.5% per annum. That's faster than China was last year.
Yeah,
there you go. So we actually need to be Afro-positive and Afro-optimistic, not blindly, but we have to understand that these trends that are going on in Africa, they're not going backwards. They're going to continue, and we have to be very smart to make use of them.
Jon, thank you so much for coming in. Some positive news on a day where the markets are so red and there's so much negativity, and telling us about the growth prospects there for Mozambique. That was Jon Foster-Pedley. He's a director and dean at Henley Business School of Africa. Well, that's it right from us right here at the headquarters. Gugu, back to you at the JSE.